I know Joe Biden's a nice guy.
Joe Biden is a dummy.
How dare you?
It finally happened. President Biden held his first formal press conference since he was sworn in office 64 days ago. Now, to be clear, this is unprecedented. No president has taken that long to give their first press conference in 100 years.
Tarek listened to the president's first news conference since taking office.
This is a day that I've been waiting for.
Tarek, what else did he talk about?
He talked about a lot, Joy. The president was grilled on a number of issues, including immigration. The president was grilled.
Get back.
President was grilled.
Take a listen to the first question that President Biden got from the Associated Press.
How far are you willing to go to achieve those promises that you made to the American people?
How far are you willing to go? Man, that must have thrown him for a loop.
The president was grilled.
Hard are you going to try, President Biden? Man, you guys at the Associated Press, you stumped him.
The president was grilled.
But maybe they were just buttering him up with the first question, right?
This was a disgrace for most of the press corps. And for the president, he said some outrageous things that demanded to be pressed on. And of course, no one in the room can decide to do it. When the president of the United States says, for instance, when he has the support of a majority of Republican voters, I just checked Gallup, he's at 10% support among GOP voters.
The Republican voters I know find this despicable. Republican voters.
So what is he talking about?
I'm not talking about the elected officials. I'm talking about voters. Voters. Over 50% of them, they support what I did.
But also, again, about that document that was in front of him that he continually had to refer to. I wish someone would have asked him about that. Sir, what is that notebook that you appear to be flipping through, and why are you referencing and reading from it? Aren't you confident enough in your own answers to provide an argument?
President was grilled.
By the way, the PBS correspondent, which is paid for by your tax dollars, asked him a real tough question about why he's such a decent guy.
Yamiche Alcindor, who got the second question, she's from PBS, your tax dollars at work. This was patently embarrassing to the profession. She made the argument that the surge at the border was only happening because Mr. Biden is, quote, a moral and decent man.
Okay. How about Yamiche?
The perception of you that got you elected as a moral, decent man is the reason why a lot of immigrants are coming to this country and entrusting you with unaccompanied minors.
He didn't say that at all. You're untruthful when you ask. You are untruthful.
On the campaign trail, you called yourself a nationalist. Some people saw that as emboldening white nationalists. Now people are also saying
I don't know why you'd
that
say
the
that. That's such a racist
There
question.
are some people that say that now the Republican Party is seen as supporting white nationalists
Oh,
because of your rhetoric. What do you make of that?
I don't believe that's such a racist question. Honestly, I mean, I know you have it written down and you're going to tell me. Let me tell you, it's a racist question.
What the fuck?
She didn't bother to even quote back Biden in terms of what he said as a candidate when he literally said to migrants to surge the border, unquote.
What I would do as president is several more things. I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come. We should not be locking people up. We should be making sure we change the circumstance as we did, why they would leave in the first place.
Should someone who is here without documents, and that is his only offense, should that person be deported?
That person should not be the focus of deportation. We should fundamentally change the way we deal with things.
This wasn't only bias in broad daylight, it was activism. But kudos to Kristen Welker, who was the only reporter there to actually press Mr. Biden on media access to migrant facilities.
Brian, it's great to be with you. Great to see you.
Look like a Puerto Rican whore. Make me sick.
You know, an astounding thing happened yesterday. A president held a press conference, and there was no name-calling, no sniping, no claims of fake news, no constant stream of lies. What a novel, radical approach this is.
The fact checks afterwards, in terms of the reviews that we saw, were almost non-existent on television, where Joe Biden says, for instance, quote, "We're sending back the vast majority of families who are coming to the U.S. border." No, you're not. Axios says that's about 13%. So that was a lie.
And he said the majority of migrant families at the border are being sent back home.
No claims of fake news, no constant stream of lies.
That was a lie. Or when Biden said this, and this was a doozy, the idea that I'm going to say, which I would never do, if an unaccompanied child ends up at the border, we're just going to let them starve to death and stay on the other side. No other previous administration did either, except Trump. In other words, he just accused his predecessor of starving children.
Biden said he would never allow unaccompanied children at the border to starve to death.
That, of course, is a lie. There is no documentation around that whatsoever. So this was a disgrace all around in terms of the questions that were asked and the answers that were given as well.
What I saw today from these guys was an absolute embarrassment to the profession that used to be called journalism. It was absolutely an embarrassment. These guys acted more as spokespeople for the White House than they did reporters.
If you listen to the right, if you listen to Fox News, if you watch some of that, they paint this picture of Joe Biden as being a senile old man who can, who bumbles around and is not in charge of his administration, is not the one making the decisions.
At one point, Joe Biden was asked what his response was to North Korea testing short-range missiles this week.
We're consulting with our allies and partners, and there will be responses if they choose to escalate. We will respond accordingly.
What was that? This is like watching rehearsals. The President of the United States is supposed to know what to say about our posture on the North Korean peninsula. Foreign policy is supposed to be his strong suit, remember? He's been dealing with North Korea for 40 years in Washington, and he needs to read from a script that someone else wrote for him.
And I think the Joe Biden that came out yesterday was very prepared. We saw his years as senator, his years as vice president come into play. He had full command.
Biden carried a little cheat sheet during the press conference that he looked down at so he could remember what points to make.
The facts. He had full command and knowledge of policy.
Even had a little cheat sheet with reporters to call on, with their little pictures next to their names. Every second of this press conference was staged, but we weren't supposed to see that.
This was a presidential press conference, talked about facts, took every question posed to him.
Everyone pretending to do their jobs independently, ignoring reality, and giving themselves a standing ovation at the end.
And he was patient and he was good. I thought he was good. I hope he does more of these.
How did he do, according to the White House?
Oh, the White House is very pleased. And frankly, there was some talk yesterday about sending thank you notes to members of the conservative media who continue to set the bar so low. And President Biden cleared it with ease. He clearly wanted to strike a real different tone.
You're just a racist who doesn't have any taste.
He's had a history of being a skeptic on Afghanistan and Afghanistan's leaders. Yesterday, he suggested he did want to remove all the troops out of Afghanistan. Not something that I support, but something that a lot of people on the left and the far right do support.
I just wish Joe Biden would give up on the war in Afghanistan or the war in Syria or the war on drugs the way he gives up on his own sentences.
So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, we're going to get a lot done.
I am your voice.
Finally, tonight, there are people who talk the talk. Some even make a living doing it. And I'm generally humored by them, the ones who think they know everything, pontificate on things about which they have no experience, no frame of reference, but still assume, presume, and fancy they know it all. Take a listen.
Look at what Janine Pirro, this is just outrageous, Janine. Janine, I'm looking at you. You should be ashamed of yourself. She said that these kids are a lower level of human being.
Joy Behar, a perfect example of one who talks the talk. Now, I just came back from the southwest border, having actually interviewed people on the front lines who say that children are being trafficked by the cartels and forced into a lower level of human being. The sheriff in charge of the largest Southwest International Border area in the United States and one of the most dangerous where the Sinaloa cartel operates, Cochise County, says that what's happening to these children is, quote, modern-day slavery. The children ultimately become slaves to the cartel. Consider this. 20% of the children brought here have no known family in the United States. Transnational cartels seize upon them, putting them in harm's way, and use and abuse these young children, physically and sexually, even keeping them under the cartel's thumb once they are in the United States because they have no family here. They are then forced to continue to work for the cartel. We're not even taking DNA, which for these lost children would help identify them. To me, that's placing innocent, vulnerable children in a deadly environment, forcing them to be a lower-level human that any reasonable person would recognize as abhorrent. It is those children I spoke about on Fox, the ones who are being trafficked, abused, and brought across the border, who then become slaves to sex traffickers. I know. Believe me, I know. As DA, I prosecuted cases like these on behalf of victims, many of whom didn't speak English and afraid to speak in their native tongue because the cartels held families in their home country under the threat of violence or retribution. I provided translators to help protect these victims. My mission, Joy, has been protecting children my whole career. I started one of the first child abuse units in the nation. Check your favorite paper, the New York Times, when child abuse was considered a social issue and not a crime. I didn't talk about it, I did it. I fought the system and made it happen. To me, a child chained to a radiator is not a social problem. A child too young to identify sexual parts of her body being abused is entitled to more than mediation. She is entitled to justice. I also started one of the first domestic violence units in the nation, fighting to protect battered women and the children forced to live with the violence, some of whom were murdered in that same violent home. I didn't just talk to talk, Joy, about children being raped, scalded, or beaten to death. I did something about it. I spent my time in emergency rooms with victims, in hospital rooms with children, and in morgues in heartbreaking silence. And you want to lecture me? You want to talk about escaping violence?
People are escaping violence, they're escaping drugs, they're escaping poverty, and with climate change on the horizon, I think it's just going to get worse.
Escaping violence? That's the point, Joy. Even the sheriff said it was modern-day slavery because the cartels hold on to these children. You think they're escaping drugs? They're becoming mules for the cartels. For 30 years, I helped people escape violence, and I punished those who committed that violence. I didn't talk about it. I didn't put myself on a chair in front of a camera and yap about something. I fought. I prosecuted. I convicted. I sentenced. And when the laws weren't strong enough, I fought to change the laws. I created task forces and provided shelters and safe havens, connecting with churches and social services and mental health professionals. So don't you ever accuse me, because unlike you, I don't just talk the talk. I have actually walked the walk. I did something. I did something. I actually did something. So instead of sitting on your butt with your friends pontificating, get down to the border, go into a courtroom, a victim center, family court, a shelter, volunteer. Have the courage to step off your comedy club stage and do something that matters, that makes a difference. And yeah, Joy, I'm talking to you. And that's my closing.